right now. Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to the MMA Islands. I'm Zach Harkness and today I'm joined by former Cage Warriors bantamweight champion, Titan FC bantamweight champion, and current UFC fighter Brett Johns. How are you doing today, Brett?
I'm very well. It's 10 o'clock back here in the UK. We are still in lockdown, still in quarantine, and I think we will be now for another 3 weeks. So I'm really missing out on training at the minute, but I'm sure it's going to be over and done with soon enough.
Well, let's sure hope so. All right, so first question. For the first 10 fights in your career, you didn't fight outside your home country of Wales. But for your 11th fight, you had your debut in Titan FC, and this fight was located in Mobile, Alabama. Now, what were the biggest differences you noticed between fighting in your home country and fighting in the U.S. for the first time?
Fighting for Titan FC was one hell of an experience, and it's an experience that I'll never forget. You know, having your first fight outside of the UK. It was firstly somewhere I had to get on a plane to travel. I think in total it was 24 hours of flying before I actually got to Mobile. It was 24 hours of traveling before I got to Mobile. But it was an amazing experience. The reason why we signed with Titan originally was to try and get that UFC veteran experience. So my first fight was Wild Watson, and I love the States, man. I'm a big fan of the States. I love the country. I love the vibe there. And and that was probably the start of the bug of me fighting in America, really.
Yeah, and you fought there a lot. So in your third fight in the UFC, you took on former title challenger Joe Soto. Sorry, you turned a lot of heads in this fight because of what you did. You scored only the second calf slicer in UFC history. When you were on the ground, what was going through your mind to attempt such a rare and tricky submission as opposed to a more conventional one?
To be honest, the Joe fight was we worked a lot on takedown defense for that fight. We knew that going in there that I wanted to be aggressive on the feet, so it kind of pushed for Joe to do the takedown. So he fell into the trap, really. Not that I had the calf slicer planned, but my takedown defense was quite solid. And when I felt his head pop on the outside of my hip, I knew that the calf slicer was there. And I thought, you know what, like, it was one of the things that kind of like, I think subconsciously I wanted to do. And I just went for it, man. And, you know, like 9 times out of 10, it probably wouldn't have worked, but the stars aligned for me that night for sure.
Yeah, it definitely did. And Joe Soto's known for being a guy who's really good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So that is even more impressive because, you know, you could probably do that to most other people. And that must be a pretty cool feeling when you're on the ground with them.
Yeah, especially when he went, like, obviously he's an EBI veteran, which is one of the most prestigious grappling tournaments you can get, the Eddie Bravo Invitational. He got to the final and fought Eddie Cummins in the final and did really well, you know. So personally, it was a hell of an achievement, not only to beat Soto, but to beat him the way that the fight went was special. It's definitely one of my best wins, for sure. But not my favorite fight, not my favorite win by a long shot. But it was definitely up there with, as a performance, my best one probably.
So which one's your favorite win?
Do you know what? My favorite fight, believe it or not, was actually a loss. You know,
Really?
My favorite fight was my Pedro Munoz fight. I felt like I was going through a lot of issues back home with just me in general, really. You know, I was going through a bit of a bad patch before the Pedro Munoz fight. Before even the Aljamain Sterling fight, I think it was at its worst. And I felt like I got over that hurdle after the Pedro Munoz fight. So I wouldn't say I learned a lot about the fight, but I learned a lot about myself rather than the skill of me in that fight, you know. And I was in a bad place, and after that fight, watching the response I got from a 3-round war, really, it was special, man. It was special. So I definitely say the Pedro fight was my favorite fight. Yeah, you know, it was a surreal moment, and to fight in the Staples Center in LA was another experience. And I was overwhelmed really with the Pedro fight.
All right. Well, let's move into the third question here. And as we know about Dana and the UFC, they love their crazy finishes. And I can think of none crazier than one of the rarest submissions in UFC history. So it's no surprise that immediately after you were booked against two top contenders in Aljamain Sterling and Pedro Munoz. Did you feel like you received more attention from the promotion and fans in general after the calf slicer finish? And if so, how did you notice it manifesting?
Yeah, I felt like there was a lot of hype being generated, and to be honest, I'd say myself as well, I got behind that hype, maybe a little bit too much. I think it got involved and got in the way of my training. That was probably, I'd go training, I'd get caught with a jab, and I'd be very annoyed. I think you're meant to be one of the best in the world, you're getting caught with these silly jabs. And to be honest, right now, looking back, I would have just said to myself, chill out, man. Things like this happened. I get jabbed every day, really. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, I definitely felt that the promotion was pushing me loads. And I was happy with that. I was happy with fighting the two guys, because even after the Aljamain Sterling fight, they said, would you want to fight Pedro? And I was happy fighting Pedro. I was so happy with that fight. I didn't want to get back in there with the guy who was outside the top 10. I wanted to fight the next guy down, and that's what they give me. So, I don't regret any decisions. I don't regret any of my losses. Would I like to go back in time and do something and probably approach the fight differently? Yes. I'm not saying that I would have beaten them guys, but I would like to go back and run them back maybe in the future, but we'll see how that goes.
All right. Well, after your fight with Pedro Munoz, you took around a year and a half layoff and returned in January of this year in Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, in that fight, you looked incredibly impressive, scoring a submission win and a fight of the night bonus against Tony Gravely. Now, what was the main reason behind that longer layoff? Do you think it was beneficial for your career, and did the win make you want to fight again much sooner?
To be honest, we wanted to get back in straight after the Pedro Munoz fight. I was really beaten up badly after that fight. I think it did take me a good 3 months to get over my injuries. Really, I had bad knees, and the UFC, my manager in the UFC kind of said, look, mate, you need to chill out a bit, maybe come back early in 2019. And then I decided to do a grappling tournament called Polaris back in the UK. And I ruptured my MCL on my right leg, and then I got over that, and in end of January 2019, I ruptured my LCL on my left leg.
Ooh.
So I kind of had two bad injuries in the space of 2 months of each other, and I think for about 2 or 3 months I was just out with my friends enjoying, and yeah, man, it was a tough time, especially because I personally wanted to fight.
Mm-hmm.
I never really got around to doing it, and we got offered a fight Eddie Wineland. That was back in March 2019, before I ruptured my LCL. Mm-hmm. That would have been a lovely fight, but obviously with the injuries, I decided to spend some of my money and go out to the UFC PI for 3 weeks, get better, get rehabbed, and I come back at the end of back from the trip. I trained the rest of 2019, and then we booked the Gravely fight for November 2019 for January 2020, and I was happy to get the win with Gravely. I wouldn't say as a performance I was too happy. I'm a perfectionist. I don't really need nobody to tell me if I've done bad or if I've done good. I kind of know that myself.
Right.
And I wasn't happy, man. I wasn't. I'll be honest with you. I think realistically, I think I got a little bit more to show. But I'll put that down to a bit of ring rust, having a bit of a year and a half layoff, and being a bit slow. There was sections in that fight where I should have been better. But now I'm training with a really good MMA gym, not far away from me, and I'm improving every day. Just before this quarantine lockdown, I felt the best I've ever felt. Sparring with the best guys in the country. In the gym I am right now, we got 3 UFC fighters, including myself. 3 world champions. I think it was 4 former world title challengers. We're in a really good gym, really good setup. I'm training with another UFC bantamweight called Jack Shaw.
I know him, yeah.
He's a really, really good up-and-coming prospect, and me and Jack have some really good gym wars, and I'm very thankful for Jack. It's his dad's gym, Shaw MMA, and they've been absolutely brilliant to me. And not only that as well, but the training up there is so good, man. We have really good guys coming through the ranks, and I'm sure the UFC will notice within the next 2 or 3 years who these guys really are.
So how long have you been training at this gym?
I've been there since the beginning of February, and I went there initially to help Jack show up with his camp, and it just works really well for me, and I have another gym which is a bit closer to me where I'm with my kickboxing coach, who's a really good guy and, former world champion in kickboxing himself.
Mhm.
And yeah, at the end of the day, I feel like I'm getting really super high level training in at the minute. It's just, I'll be honest, with the quarantine, put the brakes on a little bit, but it's okay. At the end of the day, I think the first week or so I was really anxious, but I've kind of said to myself, look, you can chill out. That's all. That's going to still be there after this is done.
Mhm.
And as soon as we're allowed out of quarantine, I'm getting straight back in the gym, and I want to fight. I want to fight in August if this is all over and done with by then.
Well, let's hope it is. So before you mentioned that you weren't exactly happy with your performance against Tony Gravely, let's say you step in there again, like go back in time and step in there again. What do you do in that fight to make yourself feel happier with your performance?
There was situations where I took the back maybe once or twice and fell off. I wasn't happy with that. I think it was twice or three times in the second round I kind of went on the back and fell off the top of Gravely. Getting taken down as many times as what I did, even though he is a Division 1 wrestler, I felt that there were situations where I could have really avoided them takedowns. I think realistically, I think it was like 4 or 5 on takedowns between me and him. And yes, the positive in that is that he's Division 1 All-American wrestler and managed to take a guy at that caliber down.
Yeah.
But to me, I got taken down too many times, in my opinion. I didn't get to showcase my stand-up as much as what I did, especially for that camp. We worked a lot on the stand-up aspect, and we didn't get around to doing it. So I was a bit disappointed with that as well.
So you said that you started training at your new gym in February, and this is after the Gravely fight, correct?
Yes, yeah.
So let's say you do your camp at this new gym that you started training at. Do you see that fight going any differently than it did?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I believe I was lacking, and the layoff did do a lot as well. I think I was lacking a lot of confidence with Gravely. Really, like, a year and a half off, coming off 2 losses. There was pressure there. There was real pressure there. Coming out of that fight and getting a win, and realistically, you can relax a little bit. Not too much, but you can relax a little bit. And being able to train with these new guys at a high level, world champions, former world champions, it's just pushing me in the right direction. And mentally, I think mentally I'm the best I've ever been, and that is hand on heart. I think I'm, going back to when I was 21 years old, picking up my first ever world title. I'm 28 now. I've had a long few years of fighting the best guys in the world, and now I feel right in this gym training with these guys, and yeah, it's amazing, man. And I just cannot wait to go into the next fight with the training I was getting straight after the Gravely fight, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I absolutely do know what you mean. So one of the main reasons you listed for your layoff was an injury you sustained in Polaris. Was the Polaris match you competed in after your Joe Soto fight?
It was after the Pedro Munoz fight. Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, thinking back, like when I said with you feel confident about hitting such an advanced submission on such a good jiu-jitsu guy like Soto, was that in your mind at all when you were going to Polaris, which is actually a BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu promotion?
Not really. I think for me personally, the reason why I did the Polaris fight was just to get. I understood that it was going to be a while until I was back in the cage, and I just wanted some competitive experience in front of a crowd. Was it the right idea? Probably not, but I put my hand in there. I fought a guy who was exceptional on the floor, who was really full-time jiu-jitsu guy, and he heel hooked me in 40 seconds. What else can I say? I'm just happy it happened on the jiu-jitsu mat and didn't happen in the octagon. That's what I'm happy about,
Right. So as we know, the UFC is trying to hold cards in Florida and on their very own fight island. Now, you were scheduled to face Montel Jackson on April 25th, but for obvious reasons, that fight fell through. So are you currently allowed to leave the country, and does fighting on an island sound appealing to you personally?
Look, I'll be honest. Like I said, fighting in the States for me, I love the setup. I love the way that the Americans push their athletes. I like the way that no matter if you win or lose in the States, they just appreciate you going out there and doing what you were born to do. And I love that, man. I love and every time I fought in America, I've never fought in a place where I didn't like it. You know, every single state that I fought in has been amazing. So the Fight Island, yeah, man, I'm up for it. I'm up for fighting anywhere really in the US, Vegas, LA, New Jersey, Florida, North Carolina, Mobile, Alabama, Kansas. I fought in most of them places. You know what I mean? And I won't mind doing a few more states. I think Texas appeals to me right now. Boston appeals to me right now. You know, Florida does appeal to me as well. That would be one to tick off the bucket list. But for personally, any fighters from the UK are not going to be able to do that right now, as we're in quarantine for another 3 weeks, where there's no flights leaving the UK. There's flights picking up, you know, like UK citizens and bringing them back into the UK, but there's nothing leaving. So unfortunately for me, with UFC Lincoln, Nebraska, you know, I would have loved to have fought Montel there. That would have been another one off the bucket list, but unfortunately, it's not meant to be. And you know, at the end of the day, things happen for a reason. I think our health comes first. Anybody who fights should know that our health comes first. But I'm really eager to get back in there, you know, and I want to fight, you know, whoever, man, whoever they want me to fight. I'm very intrigued to fight Montel. Tall, rangy southpaw guy with a quick 1-2 down the pipe. Good wrestler, strong, very, very tall for the weight. It's a good fight, you know. And am I nervous to fight? Yeah, I was hell. I was nervous to fight, but it's a good test, you know. The guy's only lost once in the UFC, and he lost against a really good guy. That was my next step, and I'm happy, man. You know, I'm just gutted now that the quarantine was put into place, and unfortunately we got to put the brakes on fighting for the minute.
Yeah. So you remarked earlier about your admiration for the United States and its fans. So have your performances in the United States, you think, have gotten the fans' admiration back at you? Do you think they're reflecting the admiration you have for them because of the performances you put in the country?
Yeah, you know, I was lucky that the first ever time I fought in the US on US soil, it just happened to be the Joe Soto calf slicer.
Mm-hmm.
I fought Aldo in New Jersey. That was an entertaining fight. I fought Pedro in LA, which should have been fight of the night. And then I fought Tony Gravely in that rally. And I've always been interested in fights when I've signed the UFC. Before the UFC, I was a boring wrestler. I got to the UFC and I seem to have come out of my shell, really, you know. But I absolutely love the place. I really do. And the people are so supportive out there. Me and my girlfriend, we try and get a week away after the fights. So wherever we fight, we try and stay about a week after.
That's cool.
Man, we love it out there. You know, we did a trip before where we spent I think it was like 14 days in America. We spent I think it was like 4 or 5 days in San Francisco. 4 or 5. We flew from there to Vegas. 4 or 5 days there. Drove from Vegas to LA. 4 or 5 days there, and drove back up to San Francisco. And it was the best holiday of my life, and I don't think I'll ever get them times back. And if I had the money, I think I'd like to live out there, but I'll need a few more bonuses first.
Well, as a guy who's actually from San Francisco himself, I'm glad to hear that you like it. And as someone from there, what are some of your favorite destinations you went to when you were there?
Pier 39. So Pier 39 in San Francisco. Believe it or not, back in Wales, we have a super famous band called the Stereophonics. And one of their songs, the lyrics is San Francisco Bay past Pier 39. So we always wanted to visit that for obviously the Stereophonics, and
that's cool.
We visited Alcatraz as well, which was like, man, that's just full of history. It's unreal, you know. People like Al Capone and them sort of guys, and I love the history of gangsters. So that was just hell of an experience itself. Vegas, put it this way, before signing the UFC, I never went to Vegas, and then I signed the UFC, and I think I've been to Vegas like 6 times in the last 2 years. So I love that place as well.
Well, I want to do just one more quick intermission between fight questions, and as we know, you're a pretty big soccer fan. Am I correct?
Yeah, I like football. We call it back here.
Football,
but yeah, I like
yes.
soccer. Yeah.
So I thought it would be fun to do like a start bench trade with some of the 3 greatest Welsh players of all time. So if you had a team and you had to start bench or trade between these 3 players: Ian Rush, Ryan Giggs, and Gareth Bale.
Oh, so what are the options again? Sorry.
Ian Rush, Ryan Giggs, Gareth Bale.
And sorry, what are the three options? Bench, start, and what?
Trade. So transfer to another team.
Right. Okay. So I'd probably trade Ryan Giggs. I'd bench Rush and start Bale. Bale all day long, man. That guy is Gareth Bale is a special football player, you know, and having seen him firsthand, watching him play, he's a fantastic player, you know. Ian Rush, another good player. Ryan Giggs, a good player in himself, but compared to the other two guys like Ian Rush and Bale, you know, them two guys were special. Especially Ian Rush years ago, he was so special, you know.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go back to the fighting questions here. And since it's your division, the bantamweight division, what are your thoughts on fighters like Aldo and Cruz getting title shots off a loss? And how do you feel about the UFC giving Henry Cejudo whoever he wants?
Yeah, I was a bit thing about the Aldo fight, you know. Not that I love Aldo. I'm a big fan of Jose Aldo, but you know, his last fight he lost against Moraes. I thought Moraes it was close. But he still lost. But he still lost the fight on it. Like on paper, he lost the fight. So I felt like, you know, getting a title shot off that. I think people who deserve the shot really from that division, Petr Yan, Aljamain Sterling, them guys deserve the shot really. But I know Sterling needs surgery on his hand. I think Orama spoke to him after the UFC rally, so he needs surgery. And I think Petr Yan was struggling with the visa. But to be perfectly honest, I'm a massive fan of Dominick Cruz. And I think he's one of the greatest ever. Is there a fight? I'd love to fight someone with that name, Dominick Cruz. You know, to step up to the octagon against him would be crazy for me. You know what I mean? I'd love to maybe get that one day. But obviously he's got Cejudo on the 9th of May, which I'll be watching very closely. Mm-hmm. And you know, people saying, is he the greatest bantamweight? I think he's the greatest bantamweight of all time.
Me too. Yeah, me too. So you mentioned earlier, which is interesting, that you actually talked to Aljamain Sterling after your fight at UFC Raleigh. Do you usually talk to your opponents after you fight them?
I've got no animosity to anybody I fight, you know. I think after the actual fight itself between Aljamain, I didn't get a chance to really have a chat with him. Pedro, I had a little sit down with Pedro the day after the fight, and we had a little chat. I'm not one of them guys who loses their bananas over like who they fight, you know. Like me and Pedro were fine. Me and Aljamain were fine. I've never actually been in a fight where it's been so hostile that I feel like I need to like be that hard man. Like Aljamain's a great guy, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Is he cocky? Does he know he's a big deal? Yes, he certainly does. But that's what sells Aljamain, and I'm a big fan of him anyway. You know, I'm a big fan of the guy. I hope he does really well. Would I like to run that back one day in the future? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. The Pedro Munoz fight, would I like to run that back in the future? Yeah, but let's not forget, like, at the minute I'm here and them guys are up here. I need a few wins. I need to get back on track. I need to get in that top 10, top 5 mark. And then maybe we'll get them fights again. You know, at the end of the day, I'm still young in this game, you know. I know that I got plenty of time, but we're just gonna fire ahead and see what happens.
I think that's an awesome mentality to have. Mm-hmm. So I'm on this next question here. On a lot of the online sources like I can find, like SureDog and the UFC Stats website, it seems like they list your nickname as the Pikey. But it seems like you're trying to change it to the Dragon, if I'm correct. And are you changing your nickname? And if so, what's the reason behind it?
I'm believe it or not, I'm not actually trying to. I'm trying to change the nickname. I'm trying to get it taken away. To be honest, it was a nickname that I didn't give to myself. It was a nickname given to me, and it's not particularly a nice nickname to have. You know what I mean? And it kind of stuck. I never liked the nickname, so I never used to say to people, "Look, this is my nickname." It just got given to me. So really? I was a bit. You know, when it did get me originally, I thought it was a bit of a joke, so I left it. And then it ended up getting more serious, and it was just a little bit too much, really, you know. So looking back, I'm just trying to I'm trying not to use it as much, really, you know. I'm not trying to change my nickname to anything else. You know, when I first started my MMA career, I thought the Joker was a good nickname, Brett the Joker Johns, because I'm quite a joker in the gym. But, I enjoy a good joke, but that never really stuck. So right now I'm just Brett Johns, trying to drop the name of the Pikey, because to be honest, it's not a very nice term to use back in the UK. It's for travellers, it's for the gypsy community, and unless you got real gypsy heritage, then you can call yourself that. That's fine, but I haven't, so that's why I'm trying to stop that.
Well, how'd you get the nickname in the first place?
Years ago, when I was a youngster, I used to go out on the town drinking a few beers here and there, and I used to wear these boots, and I think it just kind of made me look like a traveler. They were like traveling boots.
Mm-hmm.
So people used to call me the Pikey because I used to fight and I used to wear the boots. So they just assumed that I was from a traveler background, which I'm not. But that's why the nickname ended up staying there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's an interesting story. So the next question, as someone who's fought some of the best this division has to offer, you have unique insight into this question. Which one of your division's contenders do you believe has the highest chance of beating Henry Cejudo?
I'll be honest with you. I'm a believer that Aljamain Sterling will beat Cejudo. I think my personal opinion on Aljamain is that even after the fight with me and him, I've studied Aljamain a lot over the last few years. And one of my biggest things with Aljamain is that he's very unpredictable in a fight. You don't know certain fighters have a rhythm, and the scariest fighters on the planet do not have a rhythm. And it just terrifies me, to be honest. But with Aldo, when I fought him, he was really hard to figure out. And I feel like with someone like Cejudo, he would definitely cause problems for Cejudo, Aljamain. And to be honest, I really want to see that fight. It would be a really good fight. I think the fans would like to see that fight. And I'd love to be an insight on that. And I feel like that it would be an interesting fight and an interesting matchup, because Cejudo, he's a big flyweight. He's an average size, maybe average small bantamweight. Aljamain's a big bantamweight, so that's gonna be a big difference as well.
Yeah, I agree. So besides the unpredictability, is there anything that you learned in your fight with Sterling that you think would translate well for him against Cejudo?
Just his movement. He doesn't stop moving 15 minutes. He doesn't stay there and settle. Like a lot of fighters, like myself included, which I've tried to stop, to be honest, over the last few months, I like to settle before I strike. Sterling doesn't need to do that, and I feel like that would, when you plant your feet in a fight, it's really a good time to shoot in someone and take someone down. But Sterling doesn't keep his feet long enough in one place for you to shoot, and that's what I found in my fight with him. It was very hard to shoot on Sterling. So I think his movement in that fight will be a big difference. But then again, looking on the other side of the coin, Cejudo doesn't stay still either. No, so that would be really interesting, especially I think it was after the DJ fight with Cejudo. He changed his stand-up style. It was more of a karate sort of like back and forth jumping style, and I feel like he's really using that style really well. Mm-hmm. And it just makes for an interesting matchup. I like that fight. I think with Petr Yan and Cejudo, Petr Yan kind of plants his feet a bit more, and I feel like for Cejudo to shoot, it'd be a lot easier to shoot on Petr Yan than it would with Sterling.
Right. Well, unfortunately, I think this is going to be my final question for you here, and it's kind of more of a fun one. Now, is there any Welsh prospects that we should keep our eyes on to do big things in MMA?
Well, other than the UFC fighters who are already in there, like my main training partner at the minute, Jack Shaw, he's special, man. Jack is going to be the future for sure. Jack is a really good guy. There's another Jack in the UFC middleweight, Jack Marshman, really good guy. John Phillips, another good UFC Welsh fighter. But going outside of the UFC roster, people like Lewis Long, who fights on Bellator, really good guy, always in interesting fights. But you're on about prospects that I see coming on this scene and absolutely tearing the scene up. But I'm talking about another sort of McGregor-esque fighter. Is a guy called Alban Elliott. 2-0 at the minute, 3-0 at the minute. He is going to be special, man. And not only that, he can talk. and he talks well. You know, he's a guy who can take you down, sub you, or knock you out on your feet. You can decide. You know, and he's a lightweight in the UK. He's a lightweight in Wales, and another lightweight in Wales who's the Cage Warriors world champ at the minute is Mason Jones. That is he will, I think, one more title shot for Mason, he'll get in the UFC, and then Alban's coming right behind him. You know what I mean? But I've trained with Alban. I've known Alban for years, and man, the guy is special. And him and Mason, I see being the next two Welsh fighters going into the UFC for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Brett, for giving us this time out of your day for this interview. We appreciate it very much. I've been Zach Harkness with the MMA Islands, and I hope everyone watching this has a great day. See you all in the next one. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.